Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, and I'm joined by Pete. Hey, Pete.
How's it going, buddy?
Everything is great today. New episode, new cinematic release to discuss. What is it?
So, as you rightly said, it is a cinematic release. We're talking about Air. But for most people, the first time they'll have seen the show or heard of this movie will be through Amazon Prime. Air was originally going to be an Amazon Prime Video exclusive. However, after the film was made, Amazon decided to release the film in cinemas, mostly limited release everywhere. So, like, as an example, when I was in London, when it was out, of all the cinemas in London, I could only find it in one, and I could only find it for one showing in a day, once in the week. So, if I didn't catch it on a Wednesday at 7:30 p.m., I couldn't see it. We're going to obviously talk about this as a cinematic release, but the reality is that this is, for all intents and purposes, a streaming release.
Okay. Should we give a very brief synopsis? This is a biopic. Can we call it a biopic?
Yeah.
Based on real events that reenacts how Nike, the global footwear and apparel manufacturer, signed Michael Jordan to a contract after university and before he was drafted by the Chicago Bulls, the NBA, and how he signed Michael Jordan to, the shoe contract that created the Air Jordan model, the Air Jordan brand, and now the Air Jordan division of Nike. That's the context of where this is taking place in 1984, 1985, is that right?
Something like that, like early to mid. I don't remember my Michael Jordan history as well as I'd like to, but yes, something along those lines.
Yeah. In the 80s, when people were comfortable wearing purple spandex and leggings and things like that.
Exactly.
How do you think we should attack this? Should we attack this as, do we like the story, how it was depicted? Do we want to attack this in terms of, do we like the cast and the characters that they represented? Or do we want to attack this in terms of the historical significance of this story?
So probably, I think the reality is that it's going to really impact the historical significance of the story more than anything else. Because in terms of plot, I mean, the premise is super simple. Nike is not a struggling company per se, right? They are the number one shoe brand for runners in the United States. Nothing else. Their running department is literally the number one shoe brand in the country. Basketball is up and rising, and Converse has a stranglehold on all the stars. Adidas is making great pushes. That's kind of it. And, Nike wants to expand into the basketball division, but the executives aren't necessarily being supported by the leadership and by the board of directors. And so this is kind of the trials and tribulations that Matt Damon's character has to go through to not just convince the company to make a bet on Michael Jordan, but more importantly, to make such a significant bet that this would actually kind of not just change the fortunes of Michael Jordan, but literally of Nike as a company.
The point you raise, I think, is lost in this movie. And that is that Nike is not this small little underdog at the time that this took place.
Right.
Nike is a publicly listed company. They mentioned before that they are a $1 billion company, which in the 80s is not a small thing.
Yes, right.
They are the number one global manufacturer of running or walking athletic type footwear and apparel. And even you and I growing up in the 80s, I'm sure we had Nike shoes around this time and Nike t-shirts. It was not like this niche little upstart that no one had heard of. And I think that element is diminished in this movie. The historical significance of this, I think, is lost. which was it's really changed the fortunes of the NBA as a professional sports league. It certainly gave Michael Jordan a platform where, following his performance, he was the most recognized athlete in the world. It took Nike from a performance running company to a global athletic apparel and equipment manufacturer. It essentially tanked Converse, which Nike has subsequently bought. It made fortunes for people and it lost fortunes for people. And I think that significance, to be honest, is a little bit underplayed in this movie. And Nike's trying to come off as this small little company. It wasn't a small little company. It was a company that was being asked to do a cultural shift, would have focused really on that and how dramatic a change that was. I think it would have captured more accurately the historical significance of what we saw.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you're absolutely right, because especially if you look at the trailer, and especially if you just look at, some of the clips that, circulate on these talk shows and things like that,
yeah.
You get the impression that Nike is this small-time company and they're the underdogs and they're the scrappers. And that's certainly true for the basketball division.
Correct.
But that is not true for the company.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of saying Mercedes-Benz is a underdog when it comes to electric cars compared to Tesla. But I mean, forget about market cap. In terms of brand value and brand recognition, Mercedes-Benz beats the pants off of Tesla 9 times out of 10.
Especially when they made the context that, Phil Knight said it himself, Ben Affleck, who I thought did a very good Phil Knight, by the way.
Yeah.
He said himself, basketball is very small compared to running. He's like, people wear running shoes when they're running. They wear running shoes when they go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
People only wear basketball shoes when they're playing basketball. And if, using his own words, Nike, therefore, is a bigger company than Converse.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that they may have glossed over a little bit, which was that the Air Jordan brand kind of revolutionized and changed the culture of basketball shoes, right? Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I didn't have running shoes. I had basketball shoes, and that's all I ever wore. I can't hoop to save my life, but that didn't stop me from wearing basketball shoes. That didn't stop me from going out and buying Reebok pumps because it was the best, or supposedly the best, basketball shoe out there, right? And Converse, to their credit, I think as a brand, again, not as a company, because the company, as you rightly said, is owned by Nike, but as a brand has kind of gone back to that idea of, look, sneakers are sneakers. You have specific functions for them. Basketball shoes should stay on the court. For everything else, there's Converse.
So that's how I feel about the historical significance. I feel like they really underplayed how revolutionary this was. I loved the Ben Affleck character as Phil Knight. I would, and I did some research on this. I was really trying to find something where Phil Knight I was just waiting for him to be pissed off about how he was portrayed. I think Affleck did a great job, but I don't think that anyone walked out of that movie being like, wow, Phil Knight was an amazing boss, right? He came off as like pretty goofball in there. So I was looking for something online where Phil Knight would have, like some tabloid or Page Six thing where he would have said like he was really pissed off by the movie. I couldn't find anything. I'm not so upset about him. I thought Jason Bateman's character, love me some Jason Bateman, more than maybe any other actor. I feel like he had a very understated performance. Again, he spent the majority of this movie kind of arguing about budget and saying what can't be done and saying, I hope I don't get fired because of my daughter. He was a revolutionary in marketing. And I don't think that the movie portrayed how influential he was in that respect. Matt Damon, who played Sonny Vaccaro, came off as just a middle-aged manager, trying to kind of close a basketball deal. If you've ever seen Sonny Vaccaro, who I knew of the reputation of Sonny Vaccaro way before this film,
right?
He doesn't look like him whatsoever. To be honest, Danny DeVito resembles Sonny Vaccaro much more than Matt Damon does.
Okay.
But Sonny Vaccaro, I mean, he really revolutionized basketball. I mean, signing Michael Jordan was his stamp. But I mean, he was a revolutionary even before this event took place. And I feel they really kind of dumbed him down as just this dude wearing kind of like khakis, kind of trying to close a deal, like save his job.
Gambling problem.
Yeah, he was a much more aggressive and colorful, but visionary. And he revolutionized the entire basketball market. When, I mean, he left Nike, he went to Adidas, and he signed Kobe Bryant out of high school to go to Adidas. He left Adidas and he went to Reebok. Then when Reebok was acquired, then he went back to Nike. But I mean, he was extraordinarily revolutionary in this space as well. And I feel like it didn't really capture the essence of how colorful this guy was and how he saw, you know, the basketball market kind of being the leader for, you know, a footwear and apparel company, right? He knew long before this exactly what you said. Kids are going to be wearing basketball shoes to school. They may not need the ankle support. They may not need the cushioning, but this will be the de facto trend, is to wear basketball shoes for everything. The price point of basketball shoes can be dramatically higher than it currently is for running shoes. You know, there's a very small premium on running shoes. Vaccaro is a person who changed all of this, you know, with the Jordan brand and the Jordan line. So that's my viewpoint on, you know, some of the characters and how they were portrayed by the actors in this movie.
Yeah. Look, I think in terms of characterization, there may be a little bit of questions as to how authentic they are versus not. But I think the individuals are slightly less important in this. The idea is more about the brand and how it came to be rather than the individuals behind it, because otherwise you're right. I mean, the reality was that it was, you know, Jason Bateman's character who said, hey, we as a company will pay the fine to the NBA for not matching the colors. And $5,000 even today isn't cheap, but at the same time, back in the 80s was exceptionally a lot of money, right? And to pay $5,000 for 82 games is not insignificant.
When their whole budget was
$250,000 for 3 players.
Can I give you an aside?
Yeah.
There is a whole subculture out there that actually tries to find, remember, there were 2 versions of this, Michael, of the Air Jordan.
Yeah, that's right.
One with black and red and one with enough white to not incur the fine. And there is a whole subculture out there, if you go to Reddit, that tries to find an actual photo of Michael Jordan wearing the so-called illegal shoes, and no one can find an actual picture of it. In fact, for the first few games in the preseason, and I think in the regular season, he was wearing what you saw as the first mock-up in the movie, just the white with the red swoosh. And it wasn't until like a few games into his rookie season that he got the other versions, and those were the versions that had enough white so as not to violate the league's policy, and that he would not be fined. Given the lack of internet back in 1985, it's really fascinating that people would be able to do this.
I like that we don't get to see too much of Michael Jordan, because
absolutely
this is not a Michael Jordan biopic. This is about Nike and Air Jordan as a brand. And I appreciate that. I thought it was great that we saw Viola Davis as Michael Jordan's mom. There's inevitably going to be a Michael Jordan biopic.
I totally agree with you, Pete. I keep cutting you off because I agree with your points. I thought it was perfectly done, where they had someone who kind of seems like they match his body type. And his like long hands and fingers. And I thought they portrayed him absolutely the right way, where you can't ignore the fact that he's involved in it, but of course you cannot show his face. I thought it was done perfectly, exceptionally well.
Not just a credit to Ben Affleck as a director, but also the realization that, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Jordan is a tour de force.
Yeah.
And the moment you start showing his face in this movie,
Yeah.
instantly everyone's more interested in the Michael Jordan story than they are in the Nike story. In terms of direction, in terms of camera work, in terms of creative decision making, I thought that was exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah. We compare that to, remember when we watched Winning Time about the Lakers, right? That was a really interesting adjustment, I think, for you and I to make. To watch the actors that played Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, first of all, they did a great job to find, it's not easy to find people that resemble them in a way, but also people that are like professional actors that can carry those characters. I thought they did a great job of finding the Magic character, a great job of finding the Kareem character. But it's true, you could not look at them and really see anyone else. You looked at the guy and you're kind of like, yeah, that actor is playing a pretty good Magic Johnson, right? So I think you're spot on that the way that they did it in this film was absolutely the right way.
How did you feel about the movie overall? How, if I had to say, hey, what's your rating on this movie? In fact, not if I had to, I am saying, what's your rating on this movie?
I think this is a wait for watching it at home. And that's because this is not an action movie. There's no special effects. There's no sound. And I also have to say, part of it is that I think that if I didn't know this story, I would think that this is a very good dramatic movie. And I would probably then give it the rating, go see it in cinemas. However, as I said at the outset, the historical significance of this story is so huge. I think it really undersold how transformational this was. And I feel like it was positioned a little bit as a commercial transaction, right? We saw a lot of Viola Davis, who's amazing, negotiating a contract. We saw a lot of Matt Damon giving her kind of the talking points of how other companies would pitch and why she should sign with Nike. We saw a lot of conversation with him and David Falk. All that was very good, but I think it is adjacent to the most important part, which is they decided to design a very, very unique shoe and give that shoe to one person with an iconic name, an iconic logo, an iconic marketing structure. They bet their entire reputation on this one person and this one shoe and this one marketing campaign. And I thought that was a little bit pushed aside for some of the more commercial negotiations, which are interesting and important in their own right. But that's not what made the historical transformation that I was so intrigued by, I guess.
Yeah. And I think to your point, what's interesting is, in most biopics, I think the standard formula is towards the end of the movie to show real life video, to show real life interviews, and then
you're right,
the results of all those actions. I think that was more informative of the impact, right? That last 5 minutes where they're like, oh, well, this is what happened when Nike did this. And then by agreeing to this contract term, now Michael Jordan earns $500 million a year, blah, blah, blah. All of that. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been done in the movie. I'm not saying it was done poorly. I just think it would have been interesting to have that integrated as part of the main movie rather than as an epilogue of sorts.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just don't think you cannot over-exaggerate how transformational this was. And I felt like even the designing of the shoe, that should have been such a in-depth, granular process where they just kind of went down to the basement hey, dude, can you create a new shoe over the weekend? I need it by Monday. I'm going to leave now, but if you can just kind of work on it, Saturday, Sunday, that'd be great. The guy's like, okay, how about this? Oh, can you make it red? Sure, I'll make it red. I felt like it should have been, that could have been such a dramatic moment. I was really waiting for more, samples and mock-ups. And
yeah, it would have been so much more fun to see all that.
Knight would have said no way, guys, come on, this is too basic. No, it's not good enough. And he was really, really tough on them. And they kept coming up with new design, new design, new design. You saw like they could have done like, like when you flip a book and you see like the iterations after each other, you could have shown all the iterations that they had. And then finally they would have gotten something. They're like, maybe Chris Tucker came and like, wait, what about this one? This one's cool as hell. They're like, that one? Yeah, this one's awesome. And they're like, oh, okay, maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe it should be this one. I just felt there was more to that story. And that was the cool part of the story. And that was like shoved to the side a little bit,
Yeah.
Overall, the movie's good. I watched it. I enjoyed it. It's definitely, though, in my opinion, a wait for streaming.
Yeah, I walked out of it. I thought this is definitely a must-watch in cinema, of course, with the caveat that by must-watch in cinema, it's the equivalent of must-subscribe to Amazon Prime.
Right.
That was my initial gut reaction, but I thought about it, and that's almost always how it is about biopics that I really enjoy, about topics or people that I find fascinating. And I think the reality is that it's a good movie. I think it's great. It's interesting because the topic is also interesting. Mm-hmm. But, when push comes to shove, I think this is a, wait for streaming, or in this case, mooch someone's password, because I don't think that you need to watch a show or a movie to understand the significance of Michael Jordan and Air Jordan to Nike. Even if you're not a basketball fan, I think most people appreciate that. This just probably gives you more color and context.
For such an emotional story, usually I cry or I tear up at almost every biopic, right? I think of do you remember Miracle, about the 1980 US hockey team?
Yeah.
You remember at the end when the guy won the gold medal, the coach kind of went to the locker room and he just sank to the floor and put his head in his hands, right? And it was just silence, right?
Yeah.
You remember that scene? He wasn't even celebrating. He wasn't jumping. He wasn't drinking champagne. It was just the weight of the...
Yeah.
I was waiting at the end of this for Phil Knight, Vaccaro, the shoe guy, someone to just go in a closet when everyone else is out there cheering and they're just exhaling. No way. We did it. It worked. I was waiting for that emotional hook and I didn't get that at the end. There was no real uplifting end where they played this great 80s song and everyone's smiling and you're kind of tearing up. It didn't have that ending, right? Yeah. And I feel and that's when you could roll the credits. That's when you could show all the other things that happened. That could have been so powerful, and it should have been, right? I didn't get that at the end. I just felt a little bit Phil Knight's oh, sure, we'll pay him a commission. How much could it possibly be? No big deal. It just felt the ending, they didn't really stick it, I think, as emotionally, as much emotion as it could have had. So that is Air, which is technically cinematic release, but realistically, it's an Amazon Prime exclusive. And when it comes on Amazon Prime, I have to say I may actually watch it again, or at least parts of it.
It's already out on Amazon Prime.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
In the meantime, if you have any complicated feelings, or if you think that Nike sucks and Reebok rules, or Adidas, or any of these companies, why don't you reach out to us? You can like this video and leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel. You can email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com, tweet at us at FNSPodcast, or DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast.
Pete, before we sign off, can I just ask you one question?
Of course.
Nike originally began as a company named Blue Ribbon Sports.
Yeah.
Right? Between Phil Knight and a guy called, I think, Bruce Bowerman. Would you have been interested if this had been called a movie named Swoosh, and it showed how they transitioned from an importer of Japanese running shoes to, creating their own brand, adding the swoosh to it, and gaining this huge market share?
That would have been interesting to me as well. Right? I think this was more about Air Jordan, a subset of the Nike brand. Whereas I would have been interested in seeing that young Phil Knight, who still doesn't have a Porsche, struggling to get blue ribbons off the ground and doing all that. That would have also been interesting.
The story, and I think this has been confirmed, right? But the story is that they created the first Soul, using a waffle iron, right?
That's what I remember the story as being. Yeah.
I mean, those are like transformative moments as well. Like, it would have been really cool to see how they designed, the shoe, how they shaped it, I think that would be a very compelling movie as well.
Yeah, well, maybe there you go. Air 2, the sequel, or the prequel.
The prequel. Oh, yeah. I love it. All right, everybody. That's my last tangent. Thank you for joining us on Films and Stuff. I am Ethan, always joined by Pete. We will see you for our next episode. We got a lot of good stuff to discuss yet, right?
That's right. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.